thanks everybody for joining us. I hope everyone can hear me, and I really appreciate the tremendous response we've had to our outreach to invite you all here today. I'm Lauren Swain. I'm coordinator for PSR Colorado. My specialty area is healthy electric homes, and that includes hydrogen blending. That includes hydrogen in a general way, but especially hydrogen blending, because unfortunately there are many proposals coming from a few directions to bring hydrogen into our homes with the methane gas that is heating too many of our homes right now. Methane gas has many problems, both climate problems and health problems, emitting gases into our homes that can cause and exacerbate asthma and other respiratory conditions. Just as a little background, gas stoves have been found to have 12% or more of childhood asthma has been attributed to the use of gas stoves. We don't want gas in our homes for a whole lot of reasons, and some of you joined us for the gas stoves webinar that we had. So we know that, but unfortunately, hydrogen blending is the proposal is to perpetuate more gas in our homes and blend it with hydrogen. Whether that hydrogen is sourced as green or not, it is still a bad idea to bring hydrogen into our homes. And we have our excellent guest expert, Barbara Gottlieb from PSR National, who is going to tell us why this is not a healthy idea for people or the climate. And I'm just giving a little intro here to give you a couple of places where the hydrogen blending proposal is being advanced. So in our state legislature, there are several bills, and one bill is focused on advancing what's known as clean hydrogen. And Barbara's going to tell you why there really isn't such a thing, at least as far as in terms of being in our homes, and that clean is a cover-up for not being green hydrogen. And so it's adding to the myth that hydrogen can solve our climate problems, the myth that it's healthy, the myth that it's environmentally friendly. And this bill that is advancing clean hydrogen is HB, I'm trying to get it here, excuse me just a minute, HB 1281, but there's also HB 1247 and HB 1210. So we have three bills at least that are advancing hydrogen production in our state legislature. And these are being advanced by fairly, friendly legislators who we would like to, get behind, because some of these bills have positive aspects, but this is not a good plan to include hydrogen or hydrogen blending. Then the state Colorado Energy Office is promoting hydrogen and hydrogen blending in its own way, and Xcel Energy is promoting hydrogen and hydrogen blending as part of their net zero plans. A lot of these are being used to advance goals of emissions reductions and decarbonization, and it isn't adding up. So I can share some of that with you again after the meeting. We will follow up with emails, we'll follow up with recording. And but that's the heads up. Colorado Energy Office, state legislature, Colorado and Xcel Energy are three entities that we should be able to rely on for climate solutions and to make energy healthier in our state. And it's not working that way right now, but we can hopefully change that by coming together, advocating together. So again, thank you all for being here, and I will turn the floor over to Barb Gottlieb. Thank you very much for joining us and presenting here, Barb.
Lauren, thank you, and I'm really delighted to be here. So yeah, I'm Barb Gottlieb. I'm the director of the Environment and Health Program in the National Office of Physicians for Social Responsibility. Could we get my slides up? And I guess I should have a lengthier self-introduction while the slides are coming up, but I essentially don't. There we go. So hydrogen blending, that will be my focus for tonight, although hydrogen is a really complex issue. You have to understand things like the hydrogen rainbow before we really get into hydrogen blending. So it'll take me a few minutes to get there. Next slide, please. Thanks. Before we get started, I think it's always a good idea to kind of ground ourselves in remembering why we're here. Hydrogen is you've probably been hearing about hydrogen, but it's still a somewhat obscure topic, but the things that it impacts are not obscure at all. So as the slide indicates, global energy consumption is on the rise, electricity production generates a lot of greenhouse gases. All of these are contributing to climate change, which is one of our biggest health emergencies now already. There were 18 catastrophic billion-dollar extreme weather and or climate disasters last year, and there's more to come. The IPCC told us in the report that they just released in March that we need to cut our greenhouse gas emissions, and fast. 2025 needs to be the peak, and they need to start dropping after that. If we don't do that, I mean, it's our lives and our Earth that hangs in the balance. Next slide, please. So as Lauren was saying, you're hearing about hydrogen. It is being touted as the fuel of the future. It's called part of the path to free ourselves from fossil fuels and so on. It's also getting a lot of funding. So under the Inflation Reduction Act, so-called clean hydrogen, and I'll talk a little bit more later about what they mean by clean hydrogen, but in 2023, clean hydrogen plants can start receiving substantial production tax credits, up to $3 per kilo of hydrogen, and this would last for the plant's first 10 years of operation. In other words, once they get their foot in the door with these investments, they're going to want to stick with them and stick us with them for years and years to come. Now, the Department of Energy is offering the states $8 billion, yes, with a B, $8 billion to construct what they're calling hydrogen hubs. These are intended to be the first step in the creation of a national network of hydrogen production facilities and eventually a hydrogen economy. Next slide. Unfortunately, it's not as simple as they might like us to believe. Hydrogen is the most common element in the universe. That the blue in that slide of outer space, that's hydrogen. There's lots of it out there. But on Earth, it almost doesn't exist in its pure form. It bonds with other elements, and if we're going to use it, we have to split those elements where hydrogen has bonded with another substance. So some of these are really common substances like good old H2O. Another common source of hydrogen is methane, aka fracked gas. And as I think most of you know, methane is a major climate change accelerator. Almost all of the hydrogen in use today is derived from methane or other fossil fuels. In other words, if we rely on that kind of hydrogen, we will perpetuate our fossil fuel dependence. And that is not a pathway to a cooler, safer, stabilized climate. Next slide. 99%, I'm just going to read this slide. I have nothing more to say about it. It speaks for itself. 99% of hydrogen in the United States is made from fossil fuels, mostly from methane gas. If you learn nothing else from this presentation than that, hang on to that fact. So hydrogen, when it's made from methane, is called gray hydrogen. There's this kind of color coding of hydrogen. It's a series of essentially made up labels. They don't have any innate meaning. They're just meant to distinguish the different ways that the hydrogen is produced. So gray hydrogen made from methane through a process called steam methane reformation. It breaks down methane. So right off the bat, we already know it's serving to perpetuate the fracking industry. And then steam reformation as a process requires a lot of heat, which is to say a lot of inputs of additional energy. And then in terms of its output, it's very inefficient for the energy coming in. You don't get that much energy coming out. In addition, it releases greenhouse gases from two sources. So first, obviously, the methane itself, its feedstock is a greenhouse gas. It leaks into the atmosphere where it's extracted at the wellhead from the infrastructure, things like compressor stations that compress it to be moved through pipelines, and then from the pipelines themselves. Then another thing is that one of the byproducts of this process, this steam methane reformation process, one of the byproducts of that process is carbon dioxide. Guess what? Another well-known greenhouse gas. So what we are not told, but what is really very evident, is that gray hydrogen contributes to the climate crisis, which is, as I said, one of the greatest health crises and emergencies facing us today. Next slide. So to fix gray hydrogen, I put that in air quotes. Here's blue hydrogen. Blue hydrogen is the industry's new darling. Basically, blue hydrogen is gray hydrogen with the addition of carbon capture and sequestration, or CCS. I'm going to take a few moments here. I'm going to linger on this slide a little bit more than on some of the others, just to give you a quick crash course in CCS. This is a technology that's used to capture carbon dioxide. It's used or it's proposed for use in industries, including this steam methane reforming, and also coal-fired power plants, some chemical plants, and so on. The idea is to capture the CO2 before it disperses into the atmosphere. You capture it, you super compress it into a liquid, and then you pipe it to an underground storage facility where it will stay forever after. And it has to stay there forever, because if it ever gets out of there, it goes into the atmosphere, and that's exactly what we're trying to avoid. Unfortunately, like so many other things that promise us forever, especially a happily ever after type of forever, CCS in reality turns out to be something of a false promise. First of all, the CCS, as it operates now, has a pretty low capture rate. CCS technologies generally capture between 50 and 65% of the CO2 being generated. What does that mean? That means about a third of the CO2 being generated is not being captured. It's going out into the atmosphere and contributing to climate change. Secondly, the CO2 that is captured requires extensive transport by pipeline. Every industrial facility that uses CCS needs to ship its CO2 somewhere. The extensive construction of new pipelines that would be needed would generate problems that we have seen with other pipelines, for example, those used for oil. This involves things like damage to farmland, destruction of forests, disruption and sedimentation in streams, and so on. Another problem associated with pipelines is one that's getting worse, especially as climate change gets worse, where we have forces like extreme weather, but also things like erosion or vehicles or other forces. If they rupture a CO2 pipeline, the liquefied CO2 escapes as a gas, and that gas creates a risk of fatal exposure. Now, this is really weird. I mean, who knew? CO2 is what we breathe out when we exhale. But when it's in its concentrated form, it's extremely dangerous in two ways. First of all, it forms these really heavy, dense clouds that lie low on the ground and kind of creep along the ground. They hug the ground, and they displace oxygen as they do that. That means that exposure to a CO2 cloud is exposure to an asphyxiant. You can suffocate to death just by being in the cloud. Secondly, the CO2 itself, when it's that concentrated, is toxic. It causes what's called respiratory acidosis, and this can kill you. This can kill you outside of exposure to hydrogen. If it builds up in your blood, if CO2 builds up in your blood, and the body's organs regulate CO2 content very, very closely. But if you do get this high level of exposure and suffer respiratory acidosis, it can lead to coma and death. So CO2 pipeline ruptures are extremely dangerous. And then as for the storage question, how many storage facilities or storage areas can we rely on that are going to last essentially forever? Obviously, none of them have ever been tested on that type line. And as I said before, if the CO2 ever does escape, whether it's tomorrow or in 100 years, it will, of course, contribute to climate change, completely undoing the whole premise and the whole reason for the carbon capture and sequestration. And then there's another little dirty secret about carbon capture and sequestration. That's the name I learned it by. I learned it as CCS. It's actually now also being called CCUS. They insert the U to refer to use. And that's because most of the carbon that is captured these days is actually not stored. It's not sequestered. It's used by the oil industry. They inject the CO2 into wells to aid in extracting more oil. It's called enhanced oil recovery, or EOR. These EOR processes, they can inject water, they can inject chemicals, they can inject gases like CO2. And this process already accounts for an estimated 5% of total US crude oil production. 5% isn't a huge percentage, but there's so much production that that's a lot of additional oil. And so that's one of the reasons why there's actually industry support for so-called carbon capture and sequestration. So then just to sum up on this slide, and then I'll move ahead, blue hydrogen, this darling of the industry, it relies on methane. It requires heavy industry to capture the CO2. The captured CO2 is potentially harmful to the environment and to the climate. It poses risks of threat to health. And it is yet another way that hydrogen supports and sustains the fossil fuel industry, which is the very industry we need to wean ourselves from if we want to address climate change. Next slide, please. So there is green hydrogen, and this is the one that offers a serious promise of clean energy. It's in the sense that it's a zero carbon fuel. It's made by breaking down water, and it does that using 100% renewable energy. This would be a really great solution, except that there's not enough green energy to make green hydrogen. Only about 1% of the hydrogen produced in the US is green hydrogen. That's why the other percentage was 99, because there's such a tiny amount of green hydrogen. For now, the real bottleneck is that very large amounts of renewable energy are needed to make large quantities of hydrogen. And this scarcity really limits the availability of green hydrogen. I'll give you an example. A report was released just recently in Massachusetts, where they looked at the question of, could Massachusetts generate green hydrogen? And they estimated that to have enough green hydrogen to meet 20% of their current gas demand would take all of the state's wind energy. And remember, Massachusetts, unlike Colorado, it's a coastal state. It would take all of the state's wind energy projected through the year 2030. And it would leave how much? Exactly none, both to power hard-to-power sectors, or to power people's homes. I did, okay. And let me just mention, well, okay, yeah, we'll hold right there, but let me just, either one is fine. I do want to mention that for those of you who are in states where you're facing drought and water shortages, there's another problem associated with electrolysis, and that is, can you really spare the water? So let's move on to the next slide. Here's another slide where I have nothing more to say. Well, I'll say a little bit more about it, but just remember this is an important thing to grasp. Green hydrogen is a valuable and a rare commodity and should be used wisely. Next slide. So precisely because it is so rare, so scarce, PSR's position is that green hydrogen should be reserved for the uses, for the sectors that aren't easy to electrify. It's used currently in the production of fertilizer and steel. We would say it's going to be needed to decarbonize heavy industries like cement making, aviation, and other long distance transport. So there are uses for green hydrogen. There is a need for green hydrogen. Next slide. But here's where I want to talk about this question of clean hydrogen. The oil and gas industry lobby worked really hard to create this new designation for hydrogen that they call clean hydrogen. And they managed to work it into both the American Rescue Plan and the Inflation Reduction Act. So under this designation of clean, both green hydrogen and blue hydrogen are essentially equated, even though blue hydrogen will drive up greenhouse gases and contribute to all of the environmental problems associated with fracking and with carbon capture and sequestration. As Lauren mentioned, it's not just happening at the federal level. Here in Colorado, you've got similarly, you've got state level legislation to basically equate blue and green hydrogen. So I'm hoping that today's presentation will actually enable you and equip you to fight back against that legislation. Let me take a moment and acknowledge something that's a problem that I'm still struggling with. Some people, and this includes at least one PSR chapter, looks at this kind of shell game, this kind of sleight of hand where they try to palm off blue hydrogen as if it were really clean. And they say that if that's the case, then we ought to question whether or not we should even support green hydrogen, because they're afraid that it would be used in effect as a fig leaf to disguise the overwhelming advance of blue hydrogen. I think it's a point very well worth discussing. We won't discuss it now. If you want to get into it in the question and answer period, I'll be very happy to explain why I'm a little bit ambivalent, but I think essentially in disagreement with that argument. Let's go on to the next slide. Okay, so now I'm going to get into the topic as advertised, this question of hydrogen blending. We're seeing all across the country these proposals, largely from the utility companies, to mix hydrogen into methane and pipe it into our homes. It's happening nationwide. As Lauren mentioned, it's proposed by Xcel to take place right in Colorado. It's a problem for a number of reasons. Obviously, it increases the demand for methane, both as the feedstock for the hydrogen in most cases, and then because the mixtures will be predominantly methane. In a few minutes, I'll talk about why the mixture is very unlikely to be able to go beyond 20% hydrogen. If it's 20% hydrogen, it's 80% methane. That's hardly a reduction. It really would lock us into this continued dependence on methane, endangering, again, both the climate and the environment. Hydrogen blending also brings specific climate, healthy, and safety issues. So we'll start with the climate. As I've been saying, both blue hydrogen and also gray hydrogen, since they're made from methane, imply significant climate impacts. That plus the fact that they would be blended with methane in your kitchen, in your stove, or in your furnace, more greenhouse gas emissions. I'm not going to get into the health effects of climate change. Some of you are all too familiar with them, and they are worldwide. I think everybody is living with at least some impacts of climate change on health and well-being. You may be wondering, though, what if we were to blend green hydrogen with methane? So there's an interesting fact here. Even if we were to blend hydrogen at that upper level of 20% by volume, it would only reduce greenhouse gases by 6%. Now, this is kind of a puzzling as well as a disappointing outcome. And it's because hydrogen blending doesn't reduce CO2 in a linear fashion. When considered by volume, what's called the volumetric energy density of methane, of the methane, is much greater than the energy density of hydrogen. That is to say, the hydrogen, it kind of takes up more space, but you don't get as much heat or energy out of that same volume of methane. So you're going to have to burn, I beg your pardon, of hydrogen. So you have to burn more methane and then produce more greenhouse gases. Next slide. adding hydrogen blending to your home worsens air quality. I'm actually going to start not where the slide focuses on nitrogen dioxide. But let me step back one step and just remind us again that if we're producing hydrogen from fossil fuels, primarily methane, again, we're talking about fracking. As those of you in Colorado and probably 32 other states in the United States may know from your own unfortunate experience, fracking is a potent source of contamination of land, air, and water. If we're talking about blue hydrogen, again, we're talking about new construction of pipelines for the carbon capture and sequestration and all of the potential environmental damage that entails. And then, of course, the actual production of hydrogen itself creates nitrogen dioxide. So that's the first point on the slide. It increases outdoor nitrogen dioxide. Then if we're doing hydrogen blending, again, we're perpetuating the use of gas in the home, of methane gas. And we know that there are multiple threats to health from burning methane in your stoves, whether it's the nitrogen dioxide pollution, which damages the lungs, or carbon monoxide, or benzene, which is a known carcinogen. And then the actual combustion of hydrogen generates more nitrogen oxides due to the nitrogen that's available in the ambient air. So that burning a hydrogen blend in your gas stove, especially at those higher levels of blending, will increase the nitrogen dioxide that you would be choking on in your own kitchen. Next slide. There are some safety issues that are very particular, very specific to the hydrogen itself. Hydrogen ignites more easily and is more explosive than the methane that it would be blended with. This is really dangerous. You have to be sure that you don't have sources of electricity like sparks in your home. You can see in the slide what is meant to be a little static energy moving from a person's finger to a doorknob. That itself could be dangerous. Your electronics in your home, they would have to be made spark-free. There should be no sparks because hydrogen ignites with almost any air-to-fuel ratio. Another thing is that if you go beyond this 25% blending, you may need to change out your equipment. Hydrogen increases explosion risks. Other countries have done more work with hydrogen than the United States and have done also more studies, including risk assessments. There was a risk assessment done in the United Kingdom that predicted that the number of explosions per year and the risk of injuries from in-home explosions would be 4 times higher with a 20% blend of hydrogen compared to burning just methane alone. We don't know what the safety risks of blending hydrogen with methane in buildings in the United States would be because we really haven't seen those studies done. Let me also remind us that we know about gas stoves that the methane gas leaks from the appliances, including when the appliances are turned off. If methane were blended with hydrogen, that would make these leaks all the more dangerous. The U.S. National Renewable Energy Laboratory noted that gas leakage from seals at joints in service lines, these are the lines that come to your home, in confined spaces, may also increase the safety risk, and noted that, quote, this topic warrants additional risk assessment. I think we know what that means. Another safety issue is something called flame flashback. Because hydrogen ignites so easily, it can actually burn faster than the rate of the gas coming into your stove. So it actually begins to burn back up into the pipes. This can cause actually, fortunately, I think it can cause the flame to go out, but that will allow the gas to come in without combusting, leading to gas accumulations and greater possibilities of explosion within the home. Next slide. When we at PSR look at energy choices, we always look at them in terms of their effect on vulnerable populations. And what we see in regard to hydrogen and hydrogen blending is that it's likely to put already vulnerable populations further in harm's way. Again, I return to the question of methane, which most hydrogen is likely to be made from. Fracking, as you probably know, creates a lot of local pollution, and low-income communities, communities of color, and indigenous communities suffer disproportionately from fracking-related harms. Then the production of the hydrogen itself is an industrial process. It's likely to be conducted near other sources of pollution, which are almost inevitably near environmental justice communities. The indoor air pollution we'll go back to the previous slide for a moment. We're just going to hang here another moment. I won't be long. But I did want to say that the air pollution that I was referring to just a moment ago, the indoor air pollution from methane combustion and hydrogen combustion, is likely to affect Black people, indigenous people, and people of color disproportionately for several reasons. If they're low income, they are more likely to be exposed to higher concentrations of indoor pollution because they're likely to be living in smaller spaces where the concentration of air pollution can reach dangerous levels. They're more likely to rent their homes, and rental units often have older and inadequately ventilated stoves. And these groups are statistically already more exposed to other nitrogen oxides and other ambient pollutants from burning fossil fuels than are white people. They're also more likely to suffer from air pollution-related illnesses like asthma. It's especially true for Black children who already suffer asthma at basically epidemic rates. They may not have health insurance. They may not have access to quality health care. And then finally, existing health inequities are magnified by climate change. And as I've been telling you, the use of methane and of hydrogen will contribute to climate change, thus contributing indirectly to health inequities. And we can go on now to the next slide. So yeah, hydrogen blending is limited. I was saying before, probably about 20% by volume is the ceiling which it can't exceed. And as I said, a 20% volume of hydrogen means 80% of the fuel will be methane. So we're kind of back where we started. Next slide. Now think about that mixture, the proposed mixture of methane and hydrogen. The gas burning appliances that we use in the United States today were designed to burn methane. Blending it with hydrogen changes the flame speed. Remember, the hydrogen ignites more quickly and it can burn backwards up the pipe because it burns so fast, and also expands the ignition range of the gas. It ignites more readily. What does all of this mean in practical terms? It means that all of our gas burning appliances will have to be modified or replaced if the blend of gas exceeds 20% hydrogen by volume. So think about it. If your utility is pumping a high volume hydrogen blend into your home, and of course it would also be into your neighbors' homes because this would be happening neighbor-wide, then you and your neighbors will all have to replace your gas burning furnace, your gas burning stove, your gas burning hot water heater, clothes dryer, whatever you've got, immediately. For most of us, this would be painfully expensive. For low-income families, it could create an impossible situation, possibly a crisis that would force them out of their home. This is an economic injustice. Next slide. Fortunately, alternatives do exist. And that's really important. In other words, both for public health, for family economies, for environmental justice, there have to be alternatives, and there largely are. Things like heat pumps and induction stoves are already available. They're not cheap, especially not something like a heat pump. It's like replacing a furnace. But to make the transition more feasible, the Inflation Reduction Act makes tax credits and rebates available to support the replacement of these appliances. And this transition is also important because it will reduce air pollution, and these financial subsidies help to move it in the direction of a just transition. Next slide. if you think about your kitchen, you probably have a number of electric appliances there already. And we're lucky about that because this is what we need to have and what we need to do in order to decarbonize buildings. The electric appliances are a whole lot better than old-fashioned combustion of coal and gas. They're also safer, healthier, better for the climate, more efficient, and less expensive to power than is hydrogen. Next slide. So here are the points I want you to walk away from and carry with you in your brain or in your hip pocket when you go to talk to your state legislators or write a letter to your energy providers. Blending hydrogen with methane will, for use in homes and buildings, will increase greenhouse gases, extend the use of fossil fuels for decades, increase risks of accidents and fires, and perpetuate health inequities. Alternatives exist. Electric appliances are more efficient, healthier, and safer. Last slide, please. So resisting hydrogen is part of a real green path to our future. The real green path will require that we slash our use of fossil fuels, increase our use of truly clean, healthy, and renewable forms of energy and energy efficiency, and also to make some of the societal investments that will make it feasible for us to shift our lifestyles. Things like greatly increasing mass transit and active transportation options so that we don't have to rely on cars. PSR supports only green hydrogen. We insist that it must be reserved for those sectors and processes that can't be powered by electricity. But for heating our homes, cooking our meals, cooling our homes, going electric is the way to go. The more we build out our renewable energy sources, the greener our buildings and our lives will become. So thanks for coming tonight. I know this has been a lot of information to absorb. I hope that it really leaves you empowered to understand and to be able to explain to others why it's so important that we think twice about hydrogen, that we insist on green hydrogen, we oppose hydrogen blending. And for those of you who are from other states besides Colorado, and I thank the Colorado chapter for graciously having invited others beyond the state, I'll be very happy to share this information with you, with your PSR chapter, with other organizations, with your other allies. So thanks very much. Let's have the last slide just because it shows my email if you'd like to be in touch. And I do want to give a shout out to Andy Krasner, who is PSR's true hydrogen expert, who has brought me up, trained me up, and shared some of these slides with me. So thanks very much, everybody. I'd like to stop there. And Lauren, back to you.
Well, thank you, Barb. I'm just so excited to have all that information in one place. I'm looking forward to sharing the recording with those who couldn't attend and those who did attend, because it takes, sometimes multiple exposures to the information to really absorb it and be able to reiterate these points. But it is worthwhile because, as you said, it perpetuates the dependence on methane gas, this dangerous fossil fuel that is so polluting at every stage, from production to transport to use, this fuel that we cannot afford to continue to be dependent on, literally, even price-wise. The price is going up, so that's another inequity that a lot of our ratepayers are facing. And yes, we do still subsidize new pipelines to new developments, even though the PUC thankfully has heard the call that we don't want that and has started to curb the line extension allowances that Xcel can charge us ratepayers. We're still fighting though. We've had a lot of rate increases for gas, and we need these alternatives. The big picture is, if we don't get methane, whether it has hydrogen with it or not, and most of that hydrogen is produced from methane, if we don't get that out of our homes, then all the renewable energy in the world that comes onto the grid won't make a difference. So if you believe in renewable energy, whether it's from solar, whether we're having big wind farms and big solar arrays, or it's something on your home, if we depend on gas for cleaning and cooking, for cooking and heating, and water heating. We're not going to get free of the fossil fuels that are destroying our climate. And we're bringing, of course, these pollutants into our homes. So that's the big picture. We have to draw a line. Hydrogen blending is the opposite of that. So we really need to take action on this. And too many of our entities, again, remember the Colorado Energy Office, Xcel Energy, and our legislators are being fed a line, or even embracing the line, that hydrogen is the answer. And we just have to stop it. It's very, very critical. So I appreciate all this information. And why don't we take some questions? I see one question in the Q&A, and that is, who came up with the idea that hydrogen was the solution to climate change? From Bill McNally. Do you know where this came from, Barbara? Barb?
I mean, to be honest with you, I don't. I don't really know the answer to your question. The one thing that I do know is who has picked it up. And it's clearly something that the oil and gas industry has found to be in their interests, advantageous for them, whether it's because they want to use hydrogen as a means of extending the methane gas supply so that they can perpetuate that for longer, or whether they see the advantages in carbon capture and sequestration, which is an integral piece, as I was saying before, of blue hydrogen, which is most of the 99% of the gas of the hydrogen produced in the United States. They may not have come up with it, but they saw it as a good thing for their industry, and they are all behind it.
So who else has a question for us?
Lauren, I don't want to cut anybody off, but if people don't have questions, I actually would love to hear what people think about that question that I kind of posed, which is one I'm still to some extent grappling with. And that is that if it's true that almost all of the hydrogen that's produced is this so-called blue hydrogen, and there's this long litany of problems associated with it, then are we kind of shooting ourselves in the foot by supporting green hydrogen? Because, as I said, it's something of a fig leaf. It's something that the industry can hide behind. Let us think that blue hydrogen and green hydrogen are both clean hydrogen and therefore, quote, quote, good hydrogen. And are we therefore kind of stepping into a trap where we are going to be stuck with blue hydrogen and these plants that are being offered? I mean, again, remember this, I thought this was so telling. They're being offered these subsidies or credits for the next 10 years of their production. Well, that's just to get them off the ground. They plan to be around for a long time. I'd love to hear from people here to hear your opinions of that argument. Is there a way that people can either be unmuted, or should people write their thoughts into the chat?
I will do that. So we'll call on Leslie, and also Corey, you're in the queue after Leslie. So let me find out. Leslie, are you unmuted now?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you so much, Dr. Gottlieb, and to PSR for putting out this really important information and helping everybody understand that we don't want these false solutions running around. So I think to your question about, is green hydrogen a fig leaf for blue hydrogen? And the answer is yes, I think it is. And I guess I might vote for just being very clear about messaging around that. I do think if we look ahead 10 to 20 years, there may be a role for some green hydrogen in some very niche applications. And I guess I don't want to be completely opposed to that. But I think for now, we do need to call it out as being used as a fig leaf and a cover to perpetuate our reliance and addiction to fossil fuels. And that's not okay. And it's dangerous. All the things that you've pointed out. And as you may know, hydrogen, as I understand it, consumes hydroxyl radicals. And the hydroxyl radicals would normally decompose the methane. So we're actually making the methane problem worse by because hydrogen's going to leak because it's such a tiny little molecule and it leaks all over the place all the time. So but I think I would argue for, at this point, calling out the fig leaf argument, but not necessarily saying we just oppose all hydrogen forever and for more. But right now it's a fig leaf and we ought to call it out. So, and then I had a question too, in that federal definition, and I apologize because I had to come on late. There's, the category that is 1.5 kilograms of CO2 per kilogram of hydrogen. And maybe you explained that, but if you did, I apologize for missing it. And I would love to hear what you might know about that if you do.
I'm not sure I've grasped it. It has to do with the amount of CO2 that is released. But it's comparing what to the amount of release from hydrogen.
Yeah,
Could you
that's a
explain the
really
question
good.
again?
That's a really good question. And I'm a beginner, right? So, but my understanding is under the tax credit definition, and the way I found it is that it's been referred to in the hydrogen bill that's in the Colorado legislature, which I don't have up in front of me because I'm kind of in transit, but it's 45V subsection 2B, C, and D, or some such thing like that. And if you look in our bill, you'll find that. And there, this is what I don't understand or how it translates. They refer to the kind of hydrogen that produces 1.5 kilograms of CO2 per kilogram of hydrogen is in a sense considered okay, whether they're calling it clean or not. And I'm hoping that somebody somewhere knows where there are these different levels of the amount of carbon dioxide per kilogram of hydrogen, but I don't exactly know how to interpret those. And I totally understand if you don't either, but I thought I'd ask.
I think we might have the person on this call who is Harf Teitelbaum, who I think is the chapter's own expert on hydrogen. And I just wanted to ask Lauren, should we get into that, or should I know that I think you said that Corey had raised his hand in regard to this earlier question about what should be our position in regard to hydrogen. So we're kind of going in two directions at once. What would you like us to do?
Yeah, let's call on Corey because he was in line first and he just wanted to bring up the general issue of advocacy in this context. Corey, do you want to speak about that for a moment and share your
Sure,
thoughts?
Thanks. And Barb, you're amazing. Thank you so much. And again, I look at this as a family physician as kind of the issue of how do we move the needle on the ability for our children to survive. And that's where it needs to be framed. And I think you hit the nail on the head. The science shows there's more efficiency with different systems. The industry is very focused on continuing to pollute and do their thing. But thanks for bringing that up. And I guess my question is, how do we address the legislators and the supporters of this industry in a way that says, can you think just for a moment what your child is going to experience in a future world where temperatures are rising, water is decreasing, chronic disease is increasing? I keep asking that question, or at least trying to advocate that realm, because it's about our kids, not about us.
Well, Corey, I think you just answered your own question, and I think you did a fine job doing it. The health voice, the voice of physicians and nurses and other health professionals, public health officials, these are voices that really reach people, and they reach them. You reach them because you combine this ability to marshal facts and reality with something that's really heartfelt, and I think that's the voice that's needed. What you have to do is to find the opportunities to raise that voice as often and in as many places as you can. It's not easy. I think we're at the point on the curve in regard to hydrogen specifically that we were on in regard to climate change, oh my God, 20 years ago. And it's almost unfortunate. I think a lot of the progress has been made on climate change in terms of people understanding that it is real, that it is a threat, that it is now, and even beginning to accept, well, not more and more people accepting that it is human made, in part because we're already facing some of the terrible consequences. I hope we don't have to go there for hydrogen. It's going to be, you know, these invisible gases are pretty hard to point to. It will be hard to stop once the plants have been built. So it's really essential, especially for those of you who are health professionals, but also for all the rest of us, just to get out there and tell the story in a heartfelt way as often as possible. And yes, I agree. It's important to talk about our children, your children, all of our children for whom we're doing this work.
Thank you for that, Barb. I agree, Corey. And, you know, it is about the heart, but it is also about the head, because what is anybody legislating for? What are our decision makers there doing? They are representing us. It is a highly practical as well as heartfelt thing to keep children out of the hospital and alive, you know, so it is not, you know, and they keep saying to us, oh, well, you know, you're being sentimental. It is what is the practicality here? What is the result of being practical? What are the practical outcomes of policy? You know, we're talking about our future, and whose future is it, you know, that they're representing as our elected and appointed officials? What are the outcomes? Yes, I feel bad for the children, but I also feel bad that you are absorbing my vote and my money and doing things that are extremely counterproductive to our shared goals. So hats off to you for bringing up that issue. And I'll go to Harv now.
Thanks, Lauren. I just wanted to kind of, agree with what you were saying. It takes both the heart and the head, because in order to make the argument about health of our children, we need to back it up with the facts about the flaws in the IRA incentive program. And there are many. I've been talking the last couple of days to experts from NREL. I talked to somebody today from Argonne National Labs. I talked to Bob Howarth at Cornell. And just trying to get all the areas of the IRA clean hydrogen incentive program that are flawed. There are so many that I can't even go over them now. But like Leslie said, fugitive hydrogen is estimated to have a carbon dioxide equivalent value of 11 plus or minus 5 by the British government. And we had no idea about this, and it wasn't included at all in the IRA legislation. They're also using the 100-year methane carbon dioxide equivalency figures. I think they're using 28 as a factor instead of the 20-year, which is when we have to really have decisions made by. So I think when we approach the legislators, yes, a lot of them are Dems. A lot of them are either new Dems who are eager to do bipartisan legislation with the Republican, or they're Dems who are somewhat compromised and they stick in these Trojan horse provisions in the middle of bills, or else they're people who think they're doing something good. Clean hydrogen was sold to us. It was sold as the clean hydrogen, or the hydrogen economy was coming, and we all had to prepare for it because it was going to be running everything. But we're finding out more and more about it. So I kind of see, Barb, I see your predicament. And I think the more that I've learned about hydrogen, the more I've learned about green hydrogen, I think it is being used as a cover. It's being used by the industry so that they can conflate blue and green together. And basically blue hydrogen is basically the pig of gray with just some lipstick put on it. And that's all it is. And we need to educate ourselves. and we need to approach legislators from every possible perspective. Thank you.
Well, let me jump in here if I may. I certainly agree that green hydrogen is being used as a fig leaf. I also believe that there are important and legitimate uses for green hydrogen for, as we were saying earlier, those hard to electrify heavy industry sectors. And so the question isn't whether or not we think it's being used as a fig leaf. The really more extreme question that was being posed to me by one of the PSR chapters is, well, should we oppose all hydrogen? And I think it was Leslie who was saying, no, what we need to do is to be clear in our statements that what we support is green hydrogen. We support it for particular purposes. We want to reserve it. It's this very rare and precious commodity. It's not going to become common enough because we don't have enough renewable energy, and we don't want to let it soak up all of the renewable energy that's available. But we do want it to be used where other options don't exist. Hopefully that's the kind of messaging that we can present to legislators. It's an awful lot to explain to your next door neighbor. We're very far from the point where these are going to be easy to convey, simple messages that people will readily hear and absorb. That's why I spent so much time tonight talking about, well, there's the gray, well, there's the blue, well, there's the green, well, then, there's the limitations in the amount of renewable energy available. And even if we had green hydrogen, there are still problems inherent in hydrogen. My own position at this point is that we're playing catch up. We're at the beginning of the effort of fighting back against an industry that has been building for years. They're way ahead of us. That's why there's all this money coming from the Department of, $7 or $8 billion from the Department of Energy, or the money in the Inflation Reduction Act, or in the American Jobs Act as well. They're way ahead of us, and my feeling is that the realistic position to take, and it's more of a pragmatic position than it is an idealistic position, is that we have the opportunity now to try and block the worst things from happening. And so it may be that, so that less bad things happen. So green hydrogen is not the solution. It's not some, magic pill, but it's a heck of a lot better than blue hydrogen. I think it's really important to try and block blue hydrogen. Blue hydrogen's where the money's going. That's what Willie Sutton, the famous bank robber, said. Why did he rob all those banks? Because that's where the money was. That's, kind of what we have to keep our eye on right now. And if it is possible for us to both challenge and slow the commitment to blue hydrogen, and in the process, develop momentum for the arguments that we have to make and the education that we have to do about hydrogen more broadly, I think that's what we need to do.
I'm muted. Sorry about that. Thank you, Barb. Adrian Dums, would you like to share what you were posting about the legislation, et cetera?
No, I just wanted to reassure you that Senator Cutter got on this bill to help make it better and greener, and is not fully on board with the plan as written that the governor's team is pushing. And we won't hesitate to take her name off of it should it continue to be exactly what it is. And so just to reassure you guys where Senator Cutter is standing is all.
Oh, thank you very, very much. It's really encouraging to know that. And others on that bill, are likely to, I think they've done good work as legislators. There are other bills that mention hydrogen and, are promoting hydrogen in the context of a just transition, in the context of alternative energy sources, which they're not, which it isn't. It is not an alternative. So there may be some good intentions. There may be some greenwashing on these multiple bills, but every time I see hydrogen and CCUS again and again on all these bills, and knowing that our Colorado Energy Office is promoting that, I find it rather, it's very upsetting to me. And I just wonder, what it's going to take for us all to, we all have to find a way to get our messaging to the Colorado Energy Office, to the governor, to our legislators. And I'm certainly going to do my part. We did put out a legislative alert that mentions these bills, calls out these bills. We're going to do a new alert. So if anybody is not receiving our alerts, you can contact me. I'll put in the chat again, my email address. And we'll make sure that you get the updated alert that's going to include, whatever new bills have come out since last week. Went out. And maybe some updates on the hydrogen bill, hopefully encouraging ones that reflect some amendments perhaps. So let me know if you are not receiving those alerts. And if you are, keep your eyes open because we'll try to get another one out by the end of the week. Thanks. Is there anyone else who has a question? Leslie, did you have more that you wanted to say? Okay, well, we don't have to use our whole hour and a half. I could just give you a couple other quick updates that relate to this. The city of Denver, there have been proposed amendments to get gas out of new single family homes. The city of Denver has already passed a code for commercial buildings that require all space and water heating to be electric for new commercial buildings, including apartments, but for single family homes, they do not have those requirements. There are other good requirements. There is some really positive momentum, for efficiency, et cetera, new standards. But to get gas out of the new single family homes with the new code, there will have to be work done. And so again, I'll be reaching out, and I encourage all of you to follow this issue of the Denver Building Code and how single family homes will still have gas lines to them, will not benefit from the requirements for the commercial buildings unless we take action. And we want to do that with our current city council because we're going to have a new one pretty soon and we don't want to start over. So whoever is familiar with that issue or not familiar with that issue, again, feel free to reach out to me and I will familiarize you. We'll do more messaging on it. But that's another thing. And then also there was a state building code process, which was, a real step ahead. It was in response to legislation that required a state energy board to set a baseline code for all building in Colorado. And partner orgs and I and others came together to testify on the state code hearing. And they passed some good measures, but again, what we wanted to see was that they would not only set a baseline, but also make some recommendations, set some guidelines so that not every county or municipality would have to start from scratch figuring out what to include in their code. And they have yet to do that. So just a couple updates there on the code front. And I have plenty of fracking updates, but maybe that's a little off topic. Feel free to get with me about things like that as well. And if there is no one else that wants to ask questions, I guess we'll adjourn. So
Lauren
yeah.
Leslie here. I apologize. I've been in transit, so didn't get my hand lowered, but I think I will jump in on a couple things. And again, thank you. It's been a really excellent and really appreciate PSR's leadership on all of this. So thank you. I'm in transit, but the Earth Justice report on rescuing hydrogen, I think is a very nice place to start. And maybe you've already linked to that, but I think it's a really strong analysis of, maybe there's going to be a role for hydrogen, but let's be clear, it's only for a few things and here's why.
Right.
So if somebody could just look up Earth Justice rescuing hydrogen and put the link in, I think it's a great place to go. And then Lauren, I'll send to you, I'm not sure everybody knows, but Xcel's current plan is to spend over $2 billion on their gas infrastructure in the next 5 years. So we're kind of up against it, but I'll send that to you, Lauren, and a few other folks, and maybe you can get it out, because they, of course, just want to keep, talking about how green they are while they're spending $2 billion on their gas infrastructure.
Got it on for the moment because I. Hello? Okay, I guess I am unmuted. I've been asked to speak, but I'm not sure about what.
I don't know how that happened. My apologies. Joan Seaman, would you like to share?
Thanks.
Thought?
Thanks, Lauren. I just posted something in, which I did not know until I was just doing some deep diving. And it had to do with Xcel Energy building a hub in Eastern Colorado. They just announced that.
Okay. Yes, and the Colorado Energy Office is promoting these hydrogen hubs as well. But I didn't know about this. So is it being built? Is it just like breaking ground, Joan? Are you there, Joan?
Lauren Leslie here. Anybody can search. There's a press release from the governor's office. I think it was from Monday. About the hydrogen hub, and it's a proposal to DOE because, of course, there's all that federal money because they had to deal with Manchin, and so they had to put a lot of money into false solutions. Plus, the president, I think, is being poorly advised in a number of ways. Ask me about Ernest Moniz, but so just search Governor Polis hydrogen hub DOE, and you'll find it. And then again, somebody might search it and put it in. And it's a proposal, the DOE, it's all part of these big hydrogen hub things. And yes, we have our work cut out for us. But again, really appreciate PSR jumping in on this, and to Barb for helping us all get up to speed a little better. Thank you.
Leslie, just take a quick look at what I just sent regarding Xcel Energy in Eastern Colorado. They are going to build their own hub.
And how did you send this, Joan? I can't
I
see.
apologize. May I go? I sent it through the chat. I just sent it into the chat. And
I can't-
God, usually you can get a hold of it. Here it is. Xcel plans to build hydrogen hub in Colorado in an effort to deliver greener energy to the area. Xcel has proposed to construct a clean energy hydrogen center on the Eastern Plains. And this is, as Leslie was talking about, as part of the Western Interstate Hydrogen Hub. The company presented a plan to the US DOE. So they're doing it. I didn't think that they were doing this yet, but there's about 4 states, but I didn't think Xcel was going to move that fast.
Yeah, that's highly disturbing. I don't see your link in the chat, right? Oh, it's farther back. Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Oh,
you
thank
very
God.
much.
Thank
Okay,
you, Lauren.
yes,
Really
no
glad.
problem, no problem. I'm saving it right now. So, okay.
you.
Yes, thank you. Anyone else?
Lauren Leslie Glustrom here. And Evan Ravitz made a post earlier that I think is important. Will Tour came out of Boulder. He, cares about climate, running the Colorado Energy Office. But even though he's a physicist and he should understand all these things, he kind of chooses to not remember because he's busy doing the political thing, which is serving the governor. So please don't let people kind of greenwash, for Will Tour either. Say, oh, he's from Boulder, he must be thinking, well, no, he's a good guy and he cares about climate and yada, yada, but he chooses to stay ignorant when he shouldn't. And I think that's about the nicest way I can put it. And Evan's comment, I think, is an important one. It's back up in the chat, scroll back up. But those of us that come from Boulder don't think Will is as green as he is often portrayed. And I think we're seeing that in all this legislation that's coming down. That's just very poorly conceived and executed. And he's the guy who should be telling the governor, Gov, this is the wrong path. This is a false solution. And he chooses not to, or he just doesn't know that it's not right. I don't know. We don't know which, but Either way, it's not good.
Yeah, well, I've seen Tor's work, and it is frustrating to see someone who is, in a position of power, who most likely does know better, behaving the way that they do with regard to policy. But this is very common, even Polis himself, where a lot of people are very frustrated with him. However, I really thought he was one of the best Congress people that we had, and he definitely provided, he was available for a lot of people to talk to. He didn't always agree, but he was there. And I think this is the essence of it, is who are our elected and appointed officials rubbing shoulders with all the time when lobbyists are paid to be there, be a quote unquote friend and advisor, when we don't have the luxury or not allowed into the channels to be in that position. And yet the lobbyists and associated people are there all the time. So it is so critical always to make our opinion known, even if it seems like it's not getting us anywhere. If we can all engage one more person, if we can make one more call, it is certainly better than the opposite, which is they think that nobody cares. If they don't hear from us, they think nobody cares. If they hear from 10 of us, they think only 10 people care. If they hear from thousands of people on a regular basis, with us showing up and speaking up and engaging more and more with a groundswell, there's no limit to the change that we can make. I know it's not easy, but every little bit helps. So I just want to encourage everybody. Yes, it's worth it. Even talking to myself here, next time I wonder if it's worth it, I have to remind myself it's worth it, as hard as it is to seem like we're not getting anywhere, because if we don't speak up, they won't even know that there's anybody else who cares. My 2 cents about leverage. Joan, did you want, well, first of all, if anybody does want to leave early, I just want to thank you all very, very much for coming. I don't want anyone to have to stay any longer than they are prepared to, but we certainly encourage everyone to stay on and encourage the conversation to go on. We have 16 minutes left. Joan.
Question to you, Lauren. Did our state legislature define hydrogen as clean? In that Excel article, they keep using the word clean. We have clean nuclear power. They wanted to pass it. We didn't, Colorado citizens voted it down. Do you know what the status is about hydrogen? I know we had a problem, or even NREL was going to push the blue hydrogen. And so that also didn't happen. But what do you know about Excel passing the word clean hydrogen?
Harv, do you want to weigh in on that? Because are you aware of any official term green hydrogen? Does that term exist?
Well, was Joan saying green or clean? I think she was saying clean.
Clean,
right?
I'm sorry, clean. Yes.
Right,
Has that term been defined officially as far as?
It's being used left and right in all sorts of, along with the phrase clean firm energy, which is another industry concoction to mean that this is clean energy that is reliable or dependable. So they want to use clean firm. It's been, I don't know if there's any one piece of legislation. There is 1281 that is what's her name? Titoni. I don't know how to pronounce it right. But that's about clean hydrogen. But the phrase has appeared in several pieces of legislation, and it's all based on the federal program that defines clean hydrogen as the hydrogen that doesn't release any more than those tiers. The highest tier is, I think, 4 kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalent per 1 kilogram of hydrogen produced over the life cycle of the produced hydrogen. They use something called well to gate to do that. So that's the federal program. And it's shot full of problems, but once they define that as clean hydrogen, you're seeing it in all sorts of legislation. I'm not sure if it's just one. I think there's several.
Jan Rose, do you want to weigh in on that, or other questions that you have? Or I know that you spend a lot of time with legislation. I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, I'll just clarify the difference between the federal definition and the state definition. We tried to define hydrogen at clean hydrogen as only being green last session. We did not succeed because obviously fossil fuels do not want the definition of clean hydrogen to be only green. The federal definition was released in conjunction with the Inflation Reduction Act, and it has, I think, 5, maybe even 6 tiers of quote unquote clean hydrogen, with, I put in the chat, the highest amount of emissions being 6.5 kilos of carbon for every 1 kilo of hydrogen that's generated. Colorado has taken the cleanest stance in terms of only recognizing the bottom 2 as being within the state definition of clean hydrogen. So in the state definition, it's completely clean, 0 to 1, because you're using solar power to generate the power for the electrolysis to separate the hydrogen atom or hydrogen molecule. And then the second is 1.5 kilos. And I believe 1.5 kilos does not support gray hydrogen, does not support the methane blending standard, because obviously the emissions are much higher in hydrogen blending. So the only 2 recognized in statute this session in a bill that has not yet been heard in committee. So if you want to change the definition, now is the time to do it. And, you know, I could certainly argue that the definition of clean hydrogen should only be green hydrogen. Clean is hiding a multitude of sins, and the fossil fuel industry loves to call natural gas clean. So let's remember who likes to define the term clean here. So, you know, my personal suggestion is people sign up to testify on April 20th on the hydrogen bill and demand that the state's definition of clean only be green.
It sounds like a great next action alert for PSR Colorado.
Yeah, I think so. We'll probably have a couple. Harv, did you have something to add?
Yeah, let's see, am I muted? I'm not sure here.
No, you're fine, and we hear you.
Okay, I put in the chat a link to, not to disagree with Jan on this one, but I put in the chat a link to the DOE site on the tiers, so everybody can just take a look themselves. I think that's slide number 1 on this site, and talks about the different tiers of the carbon intensity of kilograms of CO2 equivalent per kilograms of hydrogen produced. So you can kind of see it's a very complicated model. The biggest incentives are for up to 0.5 kilograms carbon dioxide equivalent, which they're saying only green would qualify for, but there's still, from what I've heard, there's not enough incentives even for that to really push the green model over the fracked model. But anyway, just check that out, and people can see the whole IRA production tax credits and the whole setup there. That's all I have.
Thank you, Harv. All right. Let's see, does anyone else have their hand up? I don't see any. So we will follow up. We will rally people to, and it sounds like there's a lot of momentum to already get people there on next Thursday, but we'll get the word out with our next alert. I think that is an excellent use of our time and energy. So I'm waiting on the oil and gas permitting bill to do a second legislative alert. If it doesn't come out by the end of the week, I'll just get it out. Anyway, but we are waiting on an important bill regarding oil and gas and other industrial permitting to account for the cumulative impacts. There was a press conference about that on Monday, and it's supposed to come out by the end of the week. I really do want to give a heads up about this missing bill. I hope it's not missing much longer, but we are going to have to push very hard on this bill to get it passed because of possible resistance from the governor's office. But I hope we can do it because it's time. And another thing to be on the lookout for is fracking in Arapahoe County. There was a proposed moratorium. The county rejected it. There are two huge fracking projects that are going to create a big frack city on the eastern metro. So from Green Valley Ranch all the way down to Aurora Reservoir, already the state has approved a huge comprehensive area plan called Box Elder, but there will be further stages of permitting, and I will try to follow them because it is not a done deal. And then there is another proposal down at the Aurora Reservoir. There are some people organizing on that, and I will try to keep everybody up to date on that as well. So what was somebody, Joan, did you have something extra to add?
Just real quick, nuclear, Xcel Energy, someone posted that Xcel Energy is not producing any hydrogen. And in fact, Xcel Energy has signed a contract with small modular reactors, nuclear reactors. But the big piece was someone in the chat had made the statement that Xcel Energy wouldn't be producing hydrogen in a nuclear power plant. And they absolutely are at Prairie Island using it to produce hydrogen. It's happening at Davis-Besse in Ohio. So it is happening. So thanks. I just wanted to reiterate that. Bring that up.
I apologize, Joan. That was me, Jan Rose, who made that statement. And I was making that statement in reference to what is being planned for Colorado, not what's being planned for other states. Colorado is not looking at creating a nuclear SMR plant for the generation of hydrogen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is a bill that's pushing nuclear.
It
SMR.
died.
Good, thank you for that.
1080
Awesome
died.
it is.
It's
Thank
still
you.
in 1247, Lauren.
Yes, thank
so
you.
it's still one of the available advanced energy options, but
Oh,
it is considered to be too expensive, too lengthy in permitting and approval, and not an expense that the ratepayer should bear.
good. Excellent. Thank you. Harv?
I didn't lower my hand, I guess.
Okay, all right.
My apologies.
That's all right. Okay, well, again, everybody feel free to be in touch with me, coordinator at psrcolorado.org, or Bob Gottlieb. Do you want to say your email again?
Sure, it's the first initial and last name, so B Gottlieb at psr.org. I'll pop it into the chat.
All right, excellent. Okay, well, if there's nothing further, we just thank you very, very much for coming. Please look for our alerts and be in touch anytime that you would like to share your priorities, respond to our messages, and volunteer. We would love to have somebody take the reins of our hydrogen issue and make it their issue. We need volunteers to follow all of these issues and advocate on them through PSR, Physicians for Social Responsibility. If you know any health professionals who you would like to introduce to these issues, if you are one, if you know anyone, let's come together, because we need to build our team of health professionals. We're often called upon to have health professionals speak on various subjects, testify, et cetera. And we do have health professionals doing that, but we need more. We really do. So please be in touch and refer health professionals that you know, and yourself. You don't have to be a health professional. Allies are excellent volunteers as well. So please be in touch with me at my email, and we can work together and cover more ground better. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.